The doorbell shouldn't have worked. That's what I kept telling the police later, after everything happened. After the bodies. After the truth came out, I disconnected it 3 months ago when I moved into the house on Willowbrook Lane. The previous owner had one of those old-fashioned doorbell systems, the kind with actual mechanical chimes that rang throughout the house like a church bell. It had startled me awake twice in the first week, both times caused by neighborhood kids playing pranks, so I disconnected it, pulled the wires myself, wrapped them in electrical tape, and tucked them back into the wall. The doorbell was dead. Non-functional. It's impossible to ring. Which is why when it rang at exactly 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, my blood turned to ice. My name is Alex Chen, and I'm a crime scene photographer. I've seen some terrible things, murders, suicides, accidents that defy description. I've photographed death in all its forms, documented horror for police files and court cases. I thought I was immune to fear. I was wrong. Because the thing about horror is that it's different when it comes to your door. When it rings your doorbell, when it knows where you sleep, and whatever rang my doorbell that night, it wasn't human, but it had been once. I was editing photos when the doorbell rang. Crime scene work from an apartment fire downtown. Nothing. Too gruesome, mostly smoke damage and insurance documentation. My home office was on the second floor. Windows open to let in the October breeze. The house was quiet except for the clicking of my mouse and the distant sound of wind. Chimes from a neighbor's yard. Then ding dong. The sound echoed through the house, crystal clear, exactly as it had before I disconnected it. My hands froze over the keyboard. I glanced at the clock in the corner of my screen. 2:17 a.m. For a moment, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the wiring had somehow reconnected itself. Maybe there was a short circuit causing a false ring. Maybe I was so tired I'd imagined it, but I knew what I'd heard. I stood up slowly, my heart rate accelerating. The house suddenly felt different, to quiet, to still, like it was holding its breath. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the security camera app. I'd installed cameras after moving in, a professional habit. If someone was at my door, I'd see them. The feed loaded. The front porch was empty. No one standing at the door. No one in the yard. Just the porch light casting its yellow glow on the weathered boards and the dormant doorbell button. I checked the timestamp. The footage was live current. I scrolled back 30 seconds. No one had approached the door. No motion at all, except for leaves blowing across the yard. Back further, 1 minute. 2 minutes. 5 minutes. Nothing. The porch had been empty the entire time, but the doorbell had rung. I'd heard it. Clear as day, I was still staring at my phone when it rang again. Ding-dash-dong. This time. I watched the security feed as it happened. The doorbell rang. I could hear it echoing through the house, but on the screen, nothing moved. No hand pressed the button. No figure appeared in frame. The doorbell just ... rang. By itself, my rational mind scrambled for explanations. Electrical malfunction, crossed wires, some kind of interference. But I disconnected it. Physically removed the power source. There was no way it could ring, unless someone had reconnected it. Unless someone was inside the walls. I grabbed a flashlight and a hammer, the closest thing to a weapon I had, and made my way downstairs. Every creak of the old house sounded, amplified, threatening. The darkness seemed thicker than usual, pressing against the edges of my flashlight beam. The front door was locked, deadbolt engaged, chain in place. Through the peephole, I could see the empty porch, exactly as it appeared on the camera. I stood there for 5 minutes, listening. Nothing. Just my own breathing and the distant sound of wind. I was turning away. When it rang again, ding dong. But this time, I was standing right next to it. I could see the button moving, unpressed. Could hear the chimes echoing from somewhere inside the walls. Could feel the vibration of it through the floorboards. The doorbell was ringing from inside the house. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat in my office with every light on, watching the security camera feeds and waiting for the doorbell to ring again. It didn't, but I knew it would. Eventually, in the morning, exhausted and jittery from too much coffee, I did what any crime scene photographer would do. I investigated. I pulled up property records for the house, searched news archives, dug into the history of 1247 Willowbrook Lane. What I found made the hair on my neck stand up. The house had been built in 1952 by a man named Robert Thorne, a door-to-door salesman. He'd lived there with his wife Margaret and their teenage son David for 15 years. In 1967, Margaret died of a sudden heart attack. 6 months later, Robert vanished. No body was ever found, no evidence of foul play. He simply disappeared one night, leaving teenage David alone in the house. David had continued living there until 1985, when he'd moved to a nursing home due to declining health. The house had gone through 4 owners since then. Each one had stayed less than 3 years before selling. I pulled up each sale record. The pattern was a doll of them sold at a loss, despite the appreciating real estate market. And each listing description mentioned quirks and unique features. Without elaborating, then I found the newspaper articles. The first was from 1968. Local teen claims, father visits from beyond the grave. According to the article, David Thorne had told police his father's ghost was ringing the doorbell every night at 2:17 a.m., trying to come home. Police investigated but found no evidence of disturbance. David was referred to a psychiatrist. The second was from 1972. Willowbrook resident arrested for disorderly conduct. David Thorne, then 25, had been found at midnight dismantling his front door with a sledgehammer, claiming he needed to let him in. He was hospitalized for psychiatric evaluation. The third was from 1979. Strange occurrences plague Willowbrook home. A brief article about David Thorne's claims that his house was haunted by his father's ghost. He rang the doorbell every night, always at the same time. Always seeking entry. I sat back in my chair, my coffee forgotten and cold. David Thorne had heard the same doorbell for nearly 20 years, always at 2:17 a.m., always with no one there. I needed to talk to David Thorne. Sunset Gardens nursing home was a depressing place. All antiseptic smells and fluorescent lights. David Thorne was in room 237, according to the receptionist. She warned me that his memory was failing, that he had good days and bad days, and that I shouldn't expect much. I found him in a wheelchair by the window, staring out at a parking lot. He was 83 years old, thin and fragile looking, but his eyes were sharp when they focused on me. Asterisk, Mr. Thorne? My name is Alex Chen. I live in your old house on Willowbrook Lane. I was hoping I could ask you some questions. He turned to look at me fully, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition? Fear? You heard it, didn't you? The doorbell. I sat down in the chair across from him. Yes, last night. At 2:17 a.m. It's been almost 40 years since I lived there, David said, his voice surprisingly steady. But I still dream about that sound. Every night. Ding dong. Always the same. Always him. Your father. You've done your research. Good. Most people think I'm crazy. Doctors, the nurses, even my own family. He leaned forward. It. That means you believe. Or you will. Mr. Thorne, what happened to your father? He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting back to the window. When he spoke, his voice was distant, remembering. My father was a door-to-door salesman, vacuum cleaners. He'd go out every morning at 8, come home at 6, like clockwork. He was very particular about routines, schedules, timing. Everything had to be exact. Dinner at 6:30, news at 7, bed at 10:30, every day the same. When he disappeared, he didn't disappear. I killed him. Asterisk, the words hung in the air between us. I'd interviewed killers before, photographed their victims, but this was different. This was a confession from someone who'd lived with their crime for over 50 years. He came home late, David continued, still staring out the window. It was February 14th, 1967. Valentine's Day. He was supposed to be home at 6. He didn't come home until 2:17 a.m., 8 hours late. When the doorbell rang, I answered it. He was standing there, drunk, reeking of perfume that wasn't my mother's. She'd been dead 6 months, and he'd already replaced her. What did you do? I invited him in. We argued. He told me I was too young to understand, that I should mind my own business. I picked up the fireplace poker. I didn't mean to hit him so hard. But when he fell, he just kept falling. Down the basement stairs, I heard his neck break from the top of the stairs. He buried him in the basement, behind the wall. The original coal chute. I sealed it up with bricks and concrete. Ever found him? They searched the house twice, but they never tore down walls. Why would they? I was just a grief-stricken teenager who'd lost both parents. They felt sorry for me. And the doorbell. David finally looked at me, and his eyes were haunted. Started the next night. 2:17 a.m., the exact time he'd come home that last night. I'd disconnected the doorbell by then, pulled the wires completely out, but it rang anyway. Every single night. For 18 years, Dean Goon, my father, trying to come home, trying to get back in. Why 2:17? Because that's when he died. It's not when I hit him. That was around 2:15, maybe 2:16. But 2:17 was when his heart stopped. I know because I stood there and watched him die. And that's the time he's locked into now. The moment of his death, playing on repeat forever. I drove home from the nursing home in a daze. David Thorne had killed his father and hidden the body in the basement. Behind the coal chute, he'd said, sealed with bricks and concrete, my basement had been renovated since 1967. The current owner before me had finished it, added drywall and carpet, turned it into a rec room. But the bones of the house were still the same. And somewhere behind those walls, the drive felt longer than it should have. Every traffic light seemed to take forever. Every turn more complicated than I remembered. My mind kept replaying David's confession. It's the way he'd said, I killed him so calmly, like he was discussing the weather. 57 years of living with that secret. 57 years of hearing his father's ghost, trying to come home. I parked in my driveway and sat there for a moment, staring at the house. It looked normal in the afternoon light, just another suburban home on a quiet street. Black shutters, a slightly overgrown lawn that I kept meaning to mow. The porch where the doorbell button sat, innocent and ordinary in the daylight. But I knew what was hidden inside its walls now. 57 years of secrets, sealed in brick and concrete. A jogger passed by, waving casually. A neighbor walked, their dog. Normal suburban afternoon activities. They had no idea what lay beneath the surface of 1247 Willowbrook Lane. No idea that every night at 2:17 a.m., a murdered man's ghost tried to wring his way back into existence. I should have called. The police. Reported what David had told me. Let them investigate, excavate, find the remains, follow proper procedure. That was the right thing to do, the legal thing, the ethical thing, but I didn't, because I needed to know for sure, needed to see it. With my own eyes before I brought the authorities in, professional habit. Crime scene photographers document truth, and I couldn't document something I hadn't verified. I couldn't risk looking like a fool, chasing ghosts and old men's confessions that might be delusions. Also I was honest enough to admit this to myself, I was curious. Morbidly, professionally curious about what I'd find, about what a body looked like after 57 years sealed in a wall, about whether David's story would match the physical evidence. I grabbed my camera bag and a crowbar from the garage and went inside. The house felt different in the daytime, less threatening, more mundane. But as I descended the basement stairs, that changed. The air grew cooler, damper. The smell of old concrete and must grew stronger. The basement stairs creaked under my weight, each step announcing my presence to whatever waited below. I flicked on the lights' modern LED bulbs that cast everything in harsh white light. The basement was finished and furnished, a sectional, couch from the previous owner, a flat-screen TV mounted on one wall. Some storage boxes I hadn't unpacked yet stacked in a corner. Exercise equipment I'd bought with good intentions, but never used. It looked like any suburban basement, normal, safe, but along the far wall. I could see the outline where the renovation had stopped. Original brick, painted over, but still visible. Beneath the modern drywall, you had to know what to look for to see it, but once I did, it was obvious. The seam where old met new. Where secrets had been covered, but not erased, that had been the coal chute wall. When houses used coal for heat, there would have been a chute from outside leading down to this wall, where coal would be dumped into a storage bin. When heating systems modernized, the chutes were sealed up, bricked over, forgotten. The logical place to hide a body. I approached the wall slowly, my footsteps seeming too loud on the carpet. My heart was beating faster, that familiar anticipation I felt. At crime scenes, the moment before the truth is revealed, before the camera documents what really happened, I ran my hand over the painted brick. It felt solid, real, cold to the touch. But somewhere behind it, I picked a spot and swung the crowbar. The drywall crumbled easily, revealing older brick. Beneath, dust filled the air, making me cough. I swung again and again, making a hole large enough to shine my flashlight through. The beam illuminated a hollow space, and within that space, I saw bones. A skull staring back at me with empty sockets. The jaw hung open in a silent scream. Ribs collapsed and rotted, still arranged in roughly anatomical order. The remnants of a suit I could see the fabric, moth-eaten and disintegrated, but still recognizably a jacket and tie. Robert Thorne, exactly where his son had left him 57 years ago. Sitting upright against the back wall of the hidden space, as if he'd sat down to rest and never gotten up, I should have been horrified. Should have called the police immediately, backed away, left the crime scene undisturbed for professional investigators. But I'm a crime scene photographer. I've seen remains before. Bodies in various states of decomposition, skeletal remains, mummified corpses. This was just another body, another crime scene, just another truth that needed to be documented. I pulled out my camera and started photographing. Professional mode engaging, emotions locked away. I photographed the skull from multiple angles, documenting the position, the angle of the jaw, the ribs, noting the lack of obvious trauma visible in the bones, the hollow where he'd been sealed, capturing the brick pattern, the concrete work. The way the space had been constructed, I photographed the suit remains, the shoes still on the feet bones, a watch still on the wrist bones stopped, I noticed when I zoomed in. At 2:17, the flash from my camera created stark shadows, making the eye sockets seem even deeper, more accusing. I was so focused on photographing that I didn't notice the time until my camera's display showed 2:16 a.m., 1 minute until the doorbell would ring. I stood there in the basement, surrounded by Robert Thorne's bones, and waited. I stood there in the basement, surrounded by Robert Thorne's bones, and waited. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the doorbell rang. Ding dash dong, but this time it was different. The sound didn't come from upstairs. It came from inside the wall, from behind the bricks, from where Robert Thorne's body lay, and then I heard something else, a voice thin and distant, like it was traveling through decades of brick and concrete. Me in. I dropped my camera and ran. Up the basement stairs, through the house, out the front door into the night. I didn't stop until I was in my car, engine running, phone in my hand, dialing 911, but I didn't press call, because as I sat there in my driveway shaking and staring at the house, I realized something. The doorbell had rung from inside the wall, from where the body was hidden, not from the front door. Which meant Robert Thorne's ghost, or whatever it was, wasn't outside trying to get in. It was inside trying to get out. I went back through the security camera footage on my phone, scrolling back through weeks of recordings. The doorbell had only started ringing after I'd moved in 3 months ago. Before that, nothing. The house had sat empty for 6 months between owners, and the cameras had recorded nothing unusual during that time. Why had it started with me? Then I remembered something David had said. That means you believe, or you will. I pulled up my work calendar on my phone. 3 months ago, right when I'd moved in, I'd been assigned to a case. A murder-suicide in an apartment complex. Crime scene had been brutal, a father who'd killed his teenage son, then himself. When I'd arrived to photograph the scene, I'd felt something, a presence, coldness that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I'd dismissed it at the time. Crime scenes always feel heavy, weighted with tragedy. But what if I'd brought something back with me? What if being exposed to violent death had made me sensitive to it, made me able to hear and see things that others couldn't? Robert Thorne had been trying to ring the doorbell for 57 years, but only certain people could hear it. David. Who'd killed him? The owners who'd stayed less than 3 years before fleeing? And now me, crime scene photographer, who spent my days documenting death. Asterisk the dead recognized their own. I spent the rest of the night researching paranormal investigation. Most of it was garbage pseudoscience and wishful thinking. But buried in the nonsense, I found some interesting patterns. Ghosts, according to most accounts, were echoes of traumatic death. They repeated the same actions, stuck in a loop, unable to move on. Robert Thorne, ringing the doorbell at 2:17 a.m., fit that pattern perfectly. He was reliving the moment of his return home over and over, but the voice I'd heard let me in that was different. That implied awareness, intent. A ghost that wasn't just replaying a memory, but actively trying to communicate. Why trying to achieve something? What did Robert Thorne want? To come home? To expose his murder? To have his body found and properly buried? Or something else? Asterisk, I pulled up the property records again, looking more carefully at the previous owners. The pattern was there, consistent. Everyone who'd stayed in the house less than 3 years had reported unusual experiences in their sale disclosures. One had mentioned unexplained sounds. Another had referred to electrical anomalies. A third had simply written, house not suitable for family living. But there was one owner who'd stayed longer, almost 5 years, a woman named Patricia Zhao. She'd owned the house from 2015 to 2020. Her disclosure mentioned nothing unusual. No sounds, no experiences, nothing. I found her obituary. She'd died in 2020, age 74. Natural causes. The house had been sold by her estate. Had she not heard the doorbell? Or had she heard it and chosen not to mention it? Or, and this was the thought that made my skin crawl, had she heard it and welcomed it? I needed to find out more about Patricia Zhao. Patricia Zhao's daughter, Linda, agreed to meet me at a coffee shop near downtown. She was in her 40s, professionally dressed, with the wary expression of someone who'd dealt with too many estate, lawyers and grief counselors. You're living in my mother's old house, she said when I sat down. Not a question, a statement. Yes, I'm sorry for your loss. I know it's been a few years, but you want to know about the doorbell? Again, not a question. I nodded. You knew? My mother told me about it before she died. She thought it was funny, actually. Said she had a ghost for a roommate, but he was very polite. Only visited once a night, always at the same time. She heard it every night for 5 years. Every single night. 2:17 a.m., like clockwork. Linda stirred her coffee absently. Most people would have moved. But my mother. She'd lost my father the year before she bought that house. Sudden heart attack. She was lonely, grieving, and I think in a weird way, the doorbell became a comfort. A reminder that she wasn't really alone. She never tried to stop it. Never. Had the house blessed or investigated? Why would she? Wasn't hurting anyone, just a sound, a pattern. She said it was like living next to train tracks eventually, you don't even notice the noise. But I knew it was more than just a sound. I'd heard the voice, felt the presence. There was something conscious behind those rings. Something that wanted something. Did your mother ever communicate with it? Try to talk to it? Linda's expression shifted, became guarded. Why do you ask? Because I found something in the basement. Remains. I think it's the original owner of the house. I think he was murdered there in 1967. She set down her coffee cup carefully. My mother knew what? She found the remains too, about 2 years into living there. She was having work done in the basement, and the contractors broke through the wall by accident. Found the bones. She should have called the police. But she didn't. Why not? She said. Linda looked uncomfortable. She said the man wanted to stay. that she'd asked him through some kind of seance thing. I don't know the details, and he'd told her he preferred to stay in the house. It's that being found, being moved, being buried in a cemetery, ... That would be worse. He wanted to stay home. That's insane. It's a crime scene. There's a murder victim hidden in that house, eh? Murder victim from 60 years ago. The killer's in a nursing home dying? What would justice look like at this point? Linda leaned forward. My mother sealed that wall back up and never told anyone, because she believed maybe through grief-induced delusion, maybe through actual supernatural communication that the ghost wanted to stay exactly where he was. And she lived there peacefully for 3 more years, until she died. It's natural causes in her sleep, upstairs in the master bedroom. The doorbell rang at 2:17 a.m. the night she died. I know because I was there, sitting by her bed, watching her breathe. When the doorbell rang, she opened her eyes, smiled, and said, "He's here." Then she died. You think the ghost Robert Thorne came for her? I think my mother liked having a ghost for company. When it was her time, maybe he escorted her out. I don't know. I don't understand any of this. I know she was happy in that house. Happier than she'd been since my father died. I left the coffee shop with more questions than answers. Patricia Zhao had found the remains, hidden them, and lived peacefully with a ghost for years. But I wasn't Patricia Zhao. I couldn't ignore a murder, couldn't seal up a crime scene and pretend it didn't exist. But what was the alternative? Call the police, excavate the basement, expose David Thorne's crime? What purpose would that serve? I didn't know, but I knew I had to make a decision soon because the doorbell would ring again tonight at 2:17 a.m., and this time I was going to answer it. I spent the day preparing if I was going to communicate with Robert Thorne's ghost stand. Yes, I was accepting that possibility now. I wanted to document it properly. This was, after all, a crime scene. And I was a crime scene photographer. I set up cameras in the basement, in the hallway, on the front porch. Multiple angles, high definition, infrared capability. If anything manifested, I'd capture it. I also set up audio recording equipment. If the ghost spoke again, I wanted to hear exactly what it said. At 2 a.m., I went to the basement. The hole I'd made in the wall was still there, dark and gaping. Behind it, Robert Thorne's bones waited in their brick tomb. I sat down on the basement floor, camera in hand, and waited. The minutes ticked by slowly. 2:10, 2:15, 2:16. At exactly 2:17 a.m. The doorbell rang, ding-dash-dong, but this time I was ready. Mr. Thorne? Robert, I can hear you. I know what happened to you. I know you were killed. I know you're trapped here. Silence. Then, from inside the wall, that thin, distant voice, "Let me in. You're already in. This is your house. You never left. Let me in." More insistent now. Almost angry, and then I understood. I wasn't trying to get into the house. He was trying to get into the living world, trying to return. To exist. To be. I can't do that, I said. I don't know how. I don't have that power. The temperature in the basement dropped suddenly. My breath misted in the air. The camera's displays flickered. "You see death," the voice said. Clearer now. "You touch death. You carry death. Let me in. Let me use you." Horror washed over me. He wanted possession. Wanted to use my body, my connection to death, to manifest in the physical world. "No," I said firmly. "I won't do that." The lights went out. All of them simultaneously. My cameras died. Even the battery-powered equipment shut down. The only light came from my phone, and even that was dimming. In the darkness, I heard movement. Not footsteps. Something else. Scraping, sliding sound. Coming from inside the wall. The bricks were moving. The story continues as Alex must confront Robert Thorne directly, discover the full truth of what happened in 1967, and make a choice that will determine whether the ghost finds peace or becomes something far more dangerous. And the secret buried in those walls is darker than anyone imagined. My doorbell rang at 2:17 a.m. No one was there previously on part 1. Alex Chen, a crime scene photographer, discovered their disconnected doorbell ringing at exactly 2:17 a.m. Investigation revealed that Robert Thorne was murdered in 1967 by his son David and hidden in the basement wall. Alex found the remains and prepared to communicate with the ghost. But when Robert Thorne demanded to let me in, seeking possession, Alex refused. Now, in complete darkness, the bricks are moving, and something is trying to break free. The scraping sound grew louder. In the absolute darkness of the basement, my phone finally died, leaving me with nothing but sound and touch and the overwhelming sense that I'd made a terrible mistake. I scrambled backward, my hands finding the stairs. Before I could climb, light bloomed in the darkness. Not electric lights, something else. Cold blue-white glow emanating from the hole I'd made in the wall. The bricks were moving, sliding out of place, falling to the floor with heavy thuds, and through the widening gap, something was emerging. Not a body, not a skeleton. Something between corporeal and ethereal figure made of pale light and shadow, wearing the shape of a man in a 1960s suit. Robert Thorne, or what was left of him. He pulled himself through the wall with slow, deliberate movements, like someone learning to use their limbs again after a long sleep. When he was fully through, he stood in my basement, translucent and glowing, and turned. To face me, his face was wrong. Not in an obvious way, it had all the right features, arranged in the right pattern. But the eyes were hollow, empty. The smile was too wide. And when he spoke, his voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "You touch death," he said. "You carry its scent. I can taste it on you. I'm a crime scene photographer. It's my job." My voice shook despite my attempt at bravado. "No, it's more than that. You're drawn to death. Fascinated by it. You chose this profession because you wanted to be close to it. You photograph the dead because you wonder what it's like. To cross over, to stop being." He was right, and I hated that he was right. I'd never admitted it to anyone, barely admitted it to myself. But Yesai was fascinated by death. By the moment of transition, by the finality of it. "That's why you can see me," Robert continued, drifting closer. "Why you can hear me. Most people can't. But you're half in my world already. It would be so easy for you to come the rest of the way. To let me in. To share this space between life and death. I told you no. I won't let you possess me." Then we're at an impasse. The ghost's smile widened impossibly, because I can't leave this house, bound to the place of my death, trapped. But you can leave, can walk away, sell this house, never come back. Let the next owner deal with me, like Patricia Zhao did. The ghost paused. "Ah, you met with her daughter." "Yes, Patricia and I had an ... arrangement. She gave me company. Conversation. She would sit down here and tell me about her day, her life, her memories of her husband. In return, I only rang the doorbell once per night. I didn't manifest. Didn't frighten her. It was peaceful. Until she died." "Until she died," Robert agreed, "and I was alone again. For 6 months before you moved in. 6 months of silence. Do you have any idea what that's like? To be conscious but trapped? To exist but not live? To be so close to the world of the living, but unable to touch it? Despite everything, despite the horror of the situation, despite the ghost standing in front of me, felt a flicker of sympathy. It must be terrible. It's hell. The ghost's form flickered, destabilizing. And I want out. I want to feel warm again, to taste food, to smell rain, to be alive, even if it's borrowed. Even if it's through you, there has to be another way. What if we gave you a proper burial? What if we... "I don't want a burial," the ghost's voice thundered through the basement, making the walls shake. "I don't want peace. I want to move on to whatever waits beyond. I want to live." I had 6 more hours before my heart stopped. 6 hours I was robbed of. I want them back. And there it was. The truth of Robert Thorne's haunting. He wasn't trapped because of unfinished business, or because he'd been murdered. He was trapped because he couldn't accept his death, because he was holding on to those last 6 hours so tightly that he'd bound himself to this plane of existence. "You're choosing this," I said, understanding dawning. "You could move on anytime you want, but you won't, because you think you deserve more time." The ghost was silent for a long moment. "Then, don't we all?" I sat down on the basement stairs, my legs shaky. The ghost remained standing, glowing softly in the darkness, watching me with those hollow eyes. "Okay," I said. "Let's talk. Really talk. No possession, no threats, just communication. You've been here for 57 years. Tell me your story. The real one. Not what David told me. I want to hear it from you." The ghost was quiet, and I thought he might refuse. Then he drifted closer and sat on the floor, not quite touching it, hovering just above the carpet. "I was a door-to-door salesman," he began. "Vacuum cleaners. It was a good living in the 50s and 60s. Not glamorous, but steady. I had a route, regular customers, a nice house, a family. Margaret, my wife, David, my son. Everything a man was supposed to want, but you weren't happy. I was ... restless. The same route every day, same sales pitch, the same dinner conversations, same life, on repeat, forever. Margaret was content with it. Oh, David was too young to understand, but I felt like I was slowly disappearing, becoming invisible. So you had an affair. Affairs, plural. Nothing serious, just something to make me feel alive, feel seen, feel like I was more than just a door-to-door salesman living in a suburban house." Robert's ghostly form flickered. "The night I died, I'd been with Linda Carmichael, a widow on my route. We'd met up at a motel after my sales rounds were done, lost track of time. I came home 8 hours late, drunk, still smelling of her perfume. David killed you. David confronted me, called me a hypocrite. His mother had just died, and there I was, replacing her. He was right. I was a hypocrite, a terrible father, a worse husband. But I didn't think I deserved to die for it. No one does. I tried to explain, tried to apologize. But David was 17 and grieving and full of rage. He picked up the fireplace poker, swung it at me, caught me on the temple. I fell. Down those basement stairs, Robert gestured toward the stairs I was sitting on, broke my neck on the 3rd step from the bottom. But I didn't die immediately. 2:17 a.m., I said. I lay there, paralyzed, watching David panic, watching him realize what he'd done. He tried to help at first, tried to move me, but when he realized my neck was broken, when he realized I was dying, he just waited, sat on those stairs and waited for me to die. It took 6 hours. 6 hours of dying. 6 hours of knowing he was going to die. 6 hours that Robert Thorne had been reliving every night for 57 years. That's why you can't move on, I said. You died slowly. You had time to fight it, to resist it. And you've been resisting ever since.
Wouldn't
you? I thought about it. If I knew I was dying, if I had hours to contemplate my end, would I accept it peacefully? Or would I cling to life with everything I had? I don't know, I admitted. Maybe. But Robert, you've had 57 years. Surely at some point you must have wondered if letting go would be better than this. Every day, he said quietly. Every single day. But I'm afraid, what if there's nothing after this? What if this half-existence is all that's left? At least here I can still feel something. Still experience time passing. Still interact with the living, even if it's just ringing a doorbell or possessing them. I only wanted to try, to see what it felt like to be alive again. I wouldn't have kept your body, just borrowed it for a little while. Tasted coffee, felt sunshine, then given it back. You can't promise that. You don't. Know what would happen once you were in control. The ghost was silent, and in that silence, I knew I was right. Robert Thorne might have convinced himself he'd only borrow my body temporarily, but the truth was, he was desperate. And desperate ghosts don't give up power easily. There has to be another way, I said. Some middle ground. Something that gives. You what you need without me giving up my body? Like what? And then I had an idea. It was crazy. Probably wouldn't work. But it was better than possession or eternal haunting. What if I could give you a window? Not full possession, but a way to experience the world through me. I go about my life, and you, ... observe. Feel what I feel, see what I see, taste what I taste. A passenger, not a driver. Robert considered this. Would I be conscious during it? Or just ... recording like a camera? Conscious. You'd experience everything I experience. But you couldn't control me. Couldn't make me do anything? Just along for the ride? For how long? 6 hours? The 6 hours you lost? You get to experience 6 hours of life through a living body, and then you move on. You finally let go and see what's on the other side. The ghost was quiet for a long time. I could see him considering it, weighing his options. Finally, how would we even do this? I don't know. But I'm willing to try. Are you? We spent the next hour researching. Me on my phone, battery recovered after the ghost stopped actively. Manifesting, searching for information about voluntary possession, spirit sharing, and consciousness linking. Most of it was nonsense New Age websites promising communication with angels, forums full of people claiming to channel ancient Egyptian pharaohs, self-proclaimed mediums offering services for hundreds of dollars. But buried in the nonsense, I found a few accounts that seemed legitimate. Academic papers written by parapsychologists studying consciousness. Case studies from cultures where spirit sharing was part of religious practice. Accounts from hospice workers who'd witnessed what they believed were spirits temporarily entering the living to say goodbye. People who'd allowed spirits to temporarily share their bodies. Not full possession like in horror movies, but something gentler. Something collaborative. A merging of consciousness that allowed the dead to briefly experience life again through the senses of the living. The method was simple in theory. Meditation, invitation, and acceptance. The living person had to willingly open themselves consciously, drop their natural defenses against spiritual intrusion. And the spirit had to promise limitations, had to agree to stay within certain boundaries. It was essentially a contract between the living and the dead, enforced not by law, but by will and intention. It requires trust, I told Robert, showing him what I'd found on my phone. I have to trust you won't try to take full control. You have to trust I won't cut the connection early or lock you out. I don't even know if I can trust myself, Robert admitted, his ghostly form flickering with uncertainty. It's been so long since I felt anything physical. The warmth of sunlight, the taste of food, the sensation of touch. Once I'm connected, once I can feel those things again through your body, I don't know if I'll have the strength to let go. When the time comes, I don't know if I'm strong enough to walk away from life a second time. His honesty was refreshing, frightening. But I appreciated it. Then we'll set conditions. Safeguards. I'll start with something small. Just 1 hour, not 6. We test it, see how it goes, see if you can respect the boundaries, if I can maintain control, if you can handle that. If you can prove you're trustworthy, we'll continue. 6 1-hour sessions over time. 6 hours total, but spread out. Gives you breaks to process what you're experiencing and gives me time to recover. It was more than Robert had asked for, and more than I'd initially offered. But it felt right. Safer, more controlled. Less likely to end with me as a meat puppet for a desperate ghost. Robert's ghostly form brightened slightly, hope emanating from him like light. You'd really do this? Risk letting me in, even partially? After I threatened you, after I tried to force possession. You were desperate. I understand desperation and ... I hesitated, then decided to be honest. I'm a crime scene photographer. I spend my life documenting death, studying it, preserving it in images. Maybe it's time I understood what death actually means from the inside. It's from the perspective of someone who's experienced it and come back. We set up in the living room. The basement felt too oppressive, too charged with the energy of Robert's murder and imprisonment. The living room was neutral territory, sunny, open, less haunted. I sat on the couch, trying to get comfortable despite my racing heart and sweating palms. My hands were shaking. I'd photographed murder victims, documented suicides, witnessed the aftermath of terrible violence. But this was different. This was inviting death inside myself, however temporarily. Robert hovered nearby, his form more solid now than it had been in the basement. As if our agreement had given him additional substance, Or maybe as if hope itself had weight.
That.
What do you want to experience? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. In this first hour, what should we do? What do you miss most about being alive? Something simple, Robert said, and his voice held a wistfulness I hadn't heard before. Make breakfast. Open a window. Feel the wind on skin. Small things I took for granted when I was alive. The things you don't realize you'll miss until they're gone forever. I don't need grand experiences or adventures. I just want to feel real again. Even briefly. Even borrowed. I nodded and closed my eyes. Began the meditation process I'd read about, following the instructions I'd found. Breathing deeply, counting. Each breath in 4 or 4 counts. Hold for 4, out for 4. Letting my consciousness expand. Opening my mind like opening a door. Inviting him in with clear boundaries. 1 hour. Observation only. No control of my body or actions. At first, nothing happened. I felt foolish, sitting on my couch with my eyes closed, waiting for a ghost to enter my mind. Part of me hoped it wouldn't work. That I'd open my eyes and Robert would still be separate, external, and I'd be safe. Then I felt it a coldness, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. It spread through my body from the center outward, making my teeth chatter and my skin prickle with goosebumps. But with the cold came something else, a presence, consciousness that wasn't mine. Sitting beside my own thoughts, like a passenger in a car, it was intimate in a way I hadn't anticipated. Not invasive exactly, but deeply personal. I could feel Robert experiencing everything I experienced: my heartbeat, my breathing, my thoughts, my memories. Everything was shared, open, vulnerable. I'm in, Robert's voice echoed in my head. Amazed and reverent, I can feel your heartbeat. Your breathing, the weight of your body on the couch. It's incredible. I forgot what being alive felt like. The constant stream of sensation, the aliveness of it. I stood up and felt his wonder as I moved. Every muscle, every joint, every tiny adjustment of balance and posture, all of it was new to him again. After 57 years of being a ghost, of existing without physical form, the simple act of standing was miraculous. I walked to the kitchen, and through my eyes, he saw the morning light streaming through the windows. The way it caught the dust motes in the air, made patterns on the floor, illuminated the ordinary objects of daily life with a golden glow. The sun, he whispered in my mind, and I felt his emotion like it was my own. I forgot how warm it looks. How alive. I used to complain about glare on my windshield when I was driving my sales route. I'd curse the sun for making it hard to see. Now I'd give anything to feel that glare, to feel that warmth on my skin. I made coffee, measuring grounds. Filling the reservoir, pressing the button, as the machine gurgled and hissed, filling the kitchen with the smell of brewing coffee. When I took the first sip, hot and bitter and slightly too strong, I felt Robert's joy at the taste crash over me like a wave. It was bitter and hot and real, and through our shared consciousness, I understood what he'd been missing. Not just the taste of coffee, but the experience of it. The warmth spreading through the body, the caffeine beginning to sharpen the mind. The ritual of it, the comfort, the simple pleasure of a morning beverage. Things I did without thinking every day were miraculous to someone who hadn't experienced them in decades. We went outside to the porch. October morning, cool and crisp. When the wind hit my face, Robert actually gasped. It's so ... real, so present. I forgot what this felt like. We spent the hour walking around the neighborhood, experiencing everything through my senses. The smell of someone's fireplace, the sound of children playing in a nearby yard, the taste of an apple I bought from a fruit stand. Every mundane detail was magic to Robert Thorne, who'd been trapped in the gray space between life and death for 57 years. When the hour was up, I felt him withdrawing, pulling back into his own separate existence. The coldness faded. The second consciousness in my head disappeared. I sat down on a park bench, shaking slightly from the experience. Robert's ghost materialized beside me, visible even in the daylight now. Thank you, he said, and his voice held more emotion than I'd heard from him yet. Thank you for that. to let me feel alive again, even briefly. 5 more hours to go, I said. You sure you can handle giving that up? Once your 6 hours are complete, you have to move on. Have to let go. I know. But that hour, that 1 hour of life, was worth 57 years of haunting. If that's all I get, if that's all there is, it's enough. Over the next week, we did 5 more sessions, each one an hour long. Each one showing Robert a different aspect of life he'd missed. In the second session, we went to a restaurant. Robert experienced the taste of a real meal steak, potatoes, wine. He marveled at the flavors, the textures, the simple joy of eating it. The third session, we went to a movie. Robert hadn't seen a film since the 1960s. The modern theater, the surround sound, the special effects, all of it amazed him. In the fourth session, we visited a museum. Robert looked at art through my eyes, experiencing beauty and creation in a way he'd forgotten was possible. In the fifth session, we went to the ocean, drove 2 hours to the coast and spent an hour walking on the beach. Between my toes, tasted the salt air, heard the waves crashing. He cried, I felt the emotion, even though he had no tears to shed. In the sixth and final session, we sat in the house on Willowbrook Lane, the place where Robert had died, where he'd been trapped for 57 years. Is there anything specific you want to do for your last hour? I asked. Just sit here, Robert said through our shared consciousness. In the house I built, in the home I tried to create, let me feel what it's like to be home, really home. Not trapped here, but choosing to be here. So we sat in the living room in comfortable silence, experiencing the house as it was meant to be experienced, a place of shelter and safety and peace. Not a prison, but a home. When the hour was up, when the 6th hour was complete, I felt Robert beginning to withdraw. Wait, I said aloud. Are you ready? Are you really ready to let go? I am, he said, and I could feel the truth of it. Thank you, Alex, for giving me those 6 hours, for showing me that life is still beautiful, still worth experiencing. It's enough. I can let go now. Where will you go? I don't know, but I'm not afraid anymore. I spent 57 years clinging to life out of fear of ending, fear of what came next. But now I'm just curious, ready to see what's on the other side. His presence faded completely from my mind. I stood up and looked around. The house felt different, lighter. The oppressive weight that had hung over it was gone. I walked to the basement. The hole in the wall was still there, but the bones were gone. Not removed, gone, as if they'd never existed. As if Robert Thorne had finally, truly moved on. Chapter 13. The aftermath. I called the police the next day. Reported that I'd found evidence of possible remains in the basement during renovation. They came with forensic teams, excavated the wall, found nothing. No bones, no evidence, nothing. They looked at me like I was crazy or wasting their time. I showed them David Thorne's confession, the recording I'd made at the nursing home. They investigated, interviewed David, but without a body, without physical evidence. There was nothing to prosecute. David was dying anyway, stage 4 cancer, the doctors said. He'd be dead within months. I visited him one more time before he passed. Told him his father had moved on, that the haunting had stopped. David cried, actual tears streaming down his withered face. Is he at peace? I think so, I hope so. Good, that's good. I've carried this guilt for 57 years, knowing I killed him, knowing I trapped him. I'm glad he's free. I'm glad it's over. David died 3 weeks later. I didn't go to the funeral, but I sent flowers. The house on Willowbrook Lane never rang its doorbell again. No ghostly visitations at 2:17 a.m., no cold spots or unexplained phenomena. It was just a house, normal, quiet, ordinary house. I lived there for 3 more years before getting a job offer in another state. When I sold it, I was honest in the disclosure. Mentioned the history, the murder, the ghost. Expected it to hurt the sale price. Instead, a paranormal investigator bought it. Paid above asking price. He was disappointed when I told him the ghost was gone, but he bought it anyway, hoping some residual energy remained. I hope he's happy there. I hope the house serves him well. It served me well in the end. Taught me things about death I'd never have learned from crime scene photos. 5 years after I left Willowbrook Lane, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simple: "Thank you." The email contained only a few lines. "I don't know if you'll get this. Don't know if email reaches across the veil, but I wanted you to know there is something after. It's beautiful. Peaceful. It's everything I was afraid to lose. Thank you for helping me find it. RT." I stared at that email for a long time, told myself it was probably fake. A prank. Someone who'd heard the story and decided to mess with me, but I chose to believe it was real. Chose to believe that Robert Thorne had found peace on the other side, that he'd been right to let go, that the 6 hours of life I'd given him had been enough to help him accept his death. I never replied to the email. What would I say? But I saved it. Keep it in a folder labeled Unexplained. Look at it sometimes when I'm editing crime scene. Photos documenting death, bearing witness to the end of lives. It reminds me that death isn't the end of everything, that there's more beyond what we can see and photograph and understand. That sometimes the greatest kindness we can offer is helping someone let go. The doorbell never rang at 2:17 a.m. again, but sometimes, late at night, I think I hear it. The harsh ding-dong that echoed through that house, but a softer sound, a gentle knock, a reminder that the dead aren't so far away, that they're still there in the spaces between life and death, sometimes needing help to cross over. And if they ring my doorbell, if they ask for help, I'll answer, every time, because that's what Robert Thorne taught me. That the dead deserve compassion too. That being trapped between worlds is its own kind of hell, and that sometimes the most important thing we can do is offer them a way forward, a way out, a way home. Epilogue: 10 years after the events at Willowbrook Lane, I run a unique service, part crime scene photography, part paranormal investigation, part ... grief counseling for ghosts. When people report hauntings, I don't go in with EMF readers and thermal cameras. I go in with compassion and curiosity. I talk to the spirits, ask them what they need, offer them what Robert taught me to offer: connection, experience, understanding. Not all of them take it. Some are too far gone, too twisted by their own deaths to accept help, but many do. Many are just afraid or confused or trapped by their own inability to let go. And when they're ready, when they've experienced enough, when they've made their peace, they move on. The hauntings stop. The houses become quiet. The families find peace. I document it all, photograph the evidence, record the testimonies, write up the cases. Not for police files or court proceedings, for myself, for the record, so that somewhere, somehow, someone knows the truth, that death isn't the end, that ghosts are real, that they can be helped. And that sometimes, when your doorbell rings at 2:17 a.m., the kindest thing you can do is answer it. The end.